50 years ago, the small town of Green Valley was shaken by a series of brutal murders that left an indelible scar on the community. Known as the Masked Man of Green Valley, the killer was never caught, and although the crimes abruptly stopped, the fear remained. The victims, young couples who frequented the town's remote areas, were found in horrific conditions. Over time, the case became a local legend, a warning of what happens when you venture too far into the woods or try to dig into the town's past. Today, Green Valley has once again become a quiet place, or so it seems. Younger residents only know the stories told by their grandparents, and for many, the Masked Man is little more than a mythical figure. However, the elderly, those who lived through the murders, know that some secrets never die, that some shadows continue to lurk in the darkest corners of the town. On the 50th anniversary of the murders, something unsettling has begun to happen. Tourists seeking thrills are reporting sightings of a masked man, and local residents feel as if history might be repeating itself. Here, a local named Thomas, who has lived in Green Valley his entire life, recounts a recent experience, an encounter that has left him convinced that the masked man has returned. My name is Thomas, and I was born in Green Valley more than 6 decades ago. I grew up hearing stories about the masked man, but I never gave them much importance. Sure, my grandfather used to tell me what had happened when he was young, how the town lived in fear during those days, how the bodies of the young were found in the woods, and how the police were never able to catch the culprit. But over the years, those stories faded, and Green Valley returned to being the peaceful place it had always been. Until recently, it all started strangely. A few days before the 50th anniversary of the murders, tourists began showing up in town. Some came because they had read about the crimes on some urban legend website. Others were just looking for a weekend getaway. But I noticed something in them, something I hadn't seen before. Fear. It wasn't the kind of fear you get from hearing a scary story. It was something deeper. Some of them spoke about a man they had seen on the edges of the forest. A tall man, wearing a white, sinister mask, who stared at them silently from a distance. They said that when they tried to approach or talk to him, he simply disappeared. At first, I thought it was just a way to add excitement to the anniversary of the murders, maybe a trick from some local prankster. But then, a young tourist came to my store one morning, pale and wide-eyed. He was trembling as he told me he had seen the masked man the previous night, near an old trail that leads to the lake. It wasn't a joke, he kept saying. I saw him. He was there, just standing, staring at me. I've never been so scared in my life. I tried to calm him down, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. It was clear he wasn't making anything up. That fear was real. Even so, I tried to stay skeptical. The mind can play tricks on you, especially in a place where legends are so strong. That same night, I decided to take my truck and drive out to the lake, where the young man claimed to have seen the masked man. I wanted to check it out for myself. I'd known that trail since I was a child. I'd spent countless days fishing at the lake and had never seen anything unusual. But when I arrived, something felt different. The air was colder than it should have been for that time of year, and the wind blew in an unsettling way, whispering through the trees. I parked my truck at the side of the trail and started walking toward the lake. At first, everything was calm. The path was familiar, the crunch of leaves under my boots comforting. But the further I ventured into the woods, the more I began to feel a presence. Something, or someone, was watching me. I stopped several times and looked around, expecting to see an animal or maybe a deer that had caused the feeling. But I saw nothing, only the darkness between the trees and the shadows cast by my flashlight. About 100 meters from the lake, I saw something, a tall figure, right at the edge of the water, completely still. My heart started pounding. From where I stood, it looked like a man. He wasn't wearing a hat or any other noticeable clothing. He was just there, standing, staring at the lake, with a white mask covering his face. I froze for a second. My first reaction was to rationalize it. Maybe it was a fisherman or another tourist looking for a spooky experience. But then he turned toward me, slowly. The mask gleamed in the moonlight, and although I couldn't see his eyes, I felt his gaze fixed on me. I lost my breath. He didn't say anything. He didn't make any sudden movements. He just stood there, staring at me, as if waiting for something. I wanted to step back, but my legs wouldn't move. It felt like my body was nailed to the ground, and only the fear kept me standing. Suddenly, without warning, the figure started to move. He didn't walk, he didn't run, he just vanished. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone, as if he had disappeared into thin air. I took a step back, then another. I felt like something was wrong, like the air had become heavier, as if the forest itself was closing in on me. I quickly turned and ran back to my truck, not daring to look behind me. I knew that if I did, I would see him again, and this time he wouldn't disappear. When I reached the truck, I started the engine and drove out of there as fast as I could. My heart was pounding in my ears, and my hands were shaking so much I could barely keep the wheel steady. I didn't stop until I reached the town, where I parked in front of my house and turned off the engine. I sat there, trying to make sense of what I had seen. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to believe that the masked man had returned, but I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't an illusion. The next day, I heard more stories from tourists. Some said they had seen the same masked man in different parts of the forest, and others claimed to have heard whispers in the dark, as if someone was following them. No one wanted to stay in Green Valley any longer, and many left before the weekend was over. I haven't gone near the lake since then, and every time night falls, I close the curtains and try not to look too long at the shadows on the street, because I know that somewhere in the woods, the masked man is waiting. And this time, I don't know if he will leave us alone. Thomas was never found. His disappearance added to the old legends of the masked man, who had returned after 50 years to continue his macabre legacy. The townspeople whispered for months, recalling the elders' warning. Never go into the woods at night. But for Thomas, the warning came too late.